Hey guys, welcome back to another show. We have an awesome show for you tonight. Good topic to talk about. Tonight we're going to do Q&A with some questions that we got asked, and then we're going to kick it off with our topic of discussion, which is going to be about why cops need to stress on training and what your body does and what your brain does under a tremendous amount of stress. So when you find yourself in that stressful moment, you don't make a bad decision that you may regret. So we're going to dive into that, which is going to be quite lengthy. So let's kick this off. Let's roll the intro. Boom, boom, boom.
Hey, 49, shot fired.
Copy, additional shot fired.
Shot fired. He's shooting at us.
Suspect shooting at officer.
Down. He's at the base of the stairs, white t-shirt, white male.
All right, so let's start out the episode tonight with some Q&A that we were asked of our last episode that we had, and that was the probation and parole searching techniques and some hiding places that we had. So, Mark, you had a question that was asked.
Yeah, this is from Maya. She asked, what is the difference between probation and parole and why we speak of it so differently? So I guess the easiest way for me to explain that is probation is jail time in the county jail before you go to prison. So if you get arrested for shoplifting or a minor crime, you may get a couple months in jail or probation, 3 years probation, instead of serving time in jail or going to prison. Parole is when you say serve 10 years in prison and you get out a little early, you may be on parole for 2 years or 3 years.
Yeah.
So there is a significant difference. Both are searchable in most cases.
I've never seen parole not searchable.
Yeah, me neither.
I have not either, actually.
Probation, there are those times,
Yeah.
but so
There's levels of probation.
yeah.
And, like you said, minor crimes, and I think that's changed somewhat now.
I imagine it has.
Yeah.
times
There's some
are different.
people that have done some major things, and they're like, yeah, we'll give you probation.
Yeah,
Right.
no, for sure. I mean,
So you're luckier. You're much luckier off, if luckier off is a word, to have probation than parole.
yeah.
Because
would
probation,
agree.
you have not been to prison.
Yeah.
One's a county jail term, and then the other one's a prison term, and you're basically
State prison, county jail.
you're basically signing away your rights as an adult by being out in society versus being locked up in a jail or prison environment. So that's just really what it means. I mean, it boils down to.
Yeah. So thanks for that, Maya.
Yeah.
Billy.
And then I had a question. I don't remember who it was from, but it was basically the importance of doing a search warrant when feasible on a probation or parole person. And, a lot of people think like, oh, probation, parole, free game. Well, there's a lot of limits to probation and parole because it's a search of that person and their things, whereas a search warrant can be their entire house, their entire vehicle. It gives you more scope where, you have a spare bedroom in this house or in a house. You have a spare bedroom in your house, probably. I have a spare bedroom in my house. It's easy for me to say like, oh no, that's not my bedroom. I don't have access to it. And I go ahead and keep everything illegal in there. So a search warrant will circumvent the ability to hide things from that. And once it goes to court, it's basically a judge's order that said you shall search something. So if they're like, why did you search that? I'd be like, instead of like, because I thought that it was his, it's the judge said I had to. And it's cleaner in court.
Yeah, good points. So awesome questions. Thank you guys for that. Sometimes it's hard for us to clarify things. I think number one, we do forget that non-law enforcement people do listen to this show, believe it or not. And then also, people do live in different states and like wherever you live, like people do things differently. So there are a lot of cops out there that wonder, like, why would you do a warrant when you have someone that's on status, meaning like probation or parole? And those are really good answers. So thanks for those. We appreciate it. And again, if you guys ever have questions, feel free to ask us. We'll clarify for you. So, but we want to dive into what exactly stress does to your body and your brain when you're under a very high stress situation. And it's I should preface this by saying your stress level is going to be different than mine. My threshold stress level is going to be different than yours. We're all going to have different thresholds of what is stressful and what's not. What I think we're seeing is cops getting put in bad situations, and we're watching this trial go on right now where an officer pulls a gun instead of her taser, shoots and kills somebody thinking it was her taser, right? And there's a lot of people that are scratching their head going, how can you possibly mistake a taser for a firearm? And it's actually very easy to answer that question. And that's how you handle stress. Because if you are not training for high stress environments, or you're not training for high stress incidences or situations, when that situation comes and your heart rate goes from normal 80 to, let's say, 100 beats per minute, something happens and boom, it spikes up to 200 plus beats per minute. Your brain kicks in, your fight or flight kicks in. There's scientific things that occur within your brain when stuff like that happens. And if you're not conditioning your brain to manage those types of situations or that high level of stress, you may do something that you don't even know what you're doing, or you may do something where you didn't mean to do it. And everybody that's watching a video or that hears of what happened or whatever, they're scratching their head going, well, how the hell can you do that? Well, it's not because that officer or that person meant to do that. It's just because they were under such tremendous amount of stress that when their brain took over for them, they did something they ordinarily would not do. And I've mentioned that before on a show, but that's like so, I can't fucking stress that enough. Like how important it is for cops to train themselves to manage stress. And that's a very controversial topic, I think. But if you're an officer out there and you are relying on your department trainings to prepare you for this job or a real life and death encounter, or even a very stressful type encounter, if that's all you're relying on, I feel like you're really you're doing yourself a serious disservice, because you have to be doing that shit outside of work. Like you have to. And there's a lot of trainers out there that offer it. Shit, I offer a business that does it based on real world experiences that I've been through. So I know how this shit affects you. But if you're just a cop that comes into this job thinking like, well, I'm just going to show up, I'm going to put in my 10 hours, I'm going to go home, or my 12-hour shift or whatever, you're in the wrong line of business. And quite frankly, I don't even think you should be a police officer if that's your train of thought. What are your guys' thoughts on as far as like at least managing stress or training yourselves for high stress situations?
I think it happens before you get into law enforcement. I mean, we all deal with stress different, and we've all had different upbringings and experiences before law enforcement or during law enforcement, even outside of law enforcement, that are stress or no stress. And, you know, my stress is before law enforcement. You know, at one point I was like, man, this is the least stressful job I've ever had.
In law enforcement or like prior?
Not the least stressful, but it's not even close to the most stressful job I've ever had. Because in law enforcement, you can show up and you can go to work, and, you know, the stress is am I coming home alive? And 99.9% of the time, luckily, we're coming home alive. And that's the stress. Or we're going to have a job kind of deal. That's the other stress, liability and stuff like that. You know, some of the things that I did, it was like, is work going to dry up tomorrow? You know, that was a stress that I had, is, you know, I have bills to pay, and it could be one day I'm hot and happy having those, you know, making good money, and tomorrow it's all gone. So that gave me a certain different type of stress, but yeah, it gave me a stress level that I came to
me, that's almost like a financial stress, where like,
which is huge. I think
it is huge, but our job, what I'm talking about is more like a life and death.
Well, I think
stress.
I think you do bring up a good point. It does start before law enforcement, what experiences you've gone through. And one of those, the real abilities to manage stress is jobs prior to that. One of them, I worked construction when the housing economy took a shit, and it was stressful. Every day is, are we going to get another house to start framing? Are we going to get another house to start doing the plumbing line? Like, those are major stresses that really affect your home life, the people around you. And then how do you translate that into law enforcement? And then you get into law enforcement. I'll skip the academy really quick, but you get into law enforcement, and there's a major sense of, okay, I have a job. I'm a part of a union. It's really, really hard to be fired as a police officer unless you do something illegal, unethical, or immoral. You can coast through your career with no tactics, no safety, and you will be completely fine until you're 50, 57, 60, whatever you choose to retire. And I do think, Bill, you bring up a good point. There's a total different level of stress.
Yeah, like a different kind of stress.
Yeah.
Well, and I think a lot of the law enforcement stress is from, it's not necessarily the danger. It's the society, right? It's what people are saying about law enforcement and say, oh, who here hasn't gone to a call where they're like, F you just because the uniform you're wearing.
Yeah.
As simple as that. And listeners, I'm sure every cop out there has had that. And that's a little bit different than you're used to in other things.
Let's talk about why do you guys think that officer pulled her handgun instead of her taser, which she intended to do? Why do you think that occurred?
That's really, it's hard to speculate, but I think in certain situations, you look at the case that you're talking about, it's a 27-year veteran, an FTO. And I think, to be honest, I think it goes back to the start of the academy. And you look at different agencies, different academies, what they teach, and it progresses with the line of training within the department. But you look at different departments, even state of California, which I believe have the most, toughest guidelines or most training or requirements for all that.
Yeah.
In neighboring agencies, training is different. The academies are different. One's harder, one's softer. You go to Southern California, Northern California, everything is so inconsistent with law enforcement across the country that I don't think you can there's no set you look at, you're an EMT, you were an EMT, I'm an EMT. You look at the standards for EMTs and paramedics, it is exactly the same all 50 states. The same training you get in California is Nevada, is Arizona, in Utah, Florida, and Maine. It is exactly the same. It's national. That's why they call it national registry. It's the exact same. The training does not differ. And you look at the practices, it is very consistent. Law enforcement, it is not consistent. It's very different training. And you look at the southern states, the eastern coast, depends on how much training you get in your department. I think that comes back to your point of you have to seek out training for yourself. You cannot rely on your department. The department is not going to provide you the extra. They will provide you the minimum, which is enough to get you through your career and survive. It is not what I believe that is necessary for a person.
Yeah, and I think it's important you have to come to an understanding that a police department or sheriff's department, whatever, like, it's a business. Okay, it's operated like a business, and there's money involved with it. You got staffing levels and stuff, and so is it feasible for departments to always go the extra mile and give you, high levels of training all the time? I don't think it is, because
it's not, because
it is business.
They do the minimum. If you look at
that's right.
certain places, you need 40 hours annually, and you need 16 hours annually of shooting. Like, those are all the minimums. They're not saying, okay, 16 is the minimum for 16 hours is minimum for shooting. Well, actually, I think the agency that I'm thinking of, twice a year, I think you qualify and you shoot 50 rounds.
Yeah.
100 rounds
that's
in one
pretty
year.
I think that's pretty standard across the board.
Yeah, that's
agencies wise.
That's not acceptable.
No.
That agency should be saying 3,000 rounds. So, but you're saying it's operated. There's an annual budget. They have to meet that, and that's how they meet that.
Well, and I think that you went to shooting, which is a perishable skill, and yeah, I mean, we need to know how to do it. Hopefully very good. But it's something that we can do on our own. You don't need to fire the rounds necessarily. You can do it at your house. Dry firing helps out a ton. But we put so much stress into oh, you got to be a great shot. You got to learn shooting. You got to practice your shooting and everything. The reality is most of us are not going to be in a shooting. Never use our firearm. That's the truth.
True.
So what we stress that you talked about it. You probably would have, if not will, talk about training for firearms, which I do think you need to do. But there's so much more that we need to train in.
I think it boils down to, and I agree with you that, yeah, most cops are not involved in a deadly encounter where they're using their firearm. So am I saying that you need to have a great shot? No, I'm not saying that at all. But what I do think to combat that is you have to be able to manage a very high level of stress. And if we're even just taking a shooting scenario out of it, let's take any situation where it could be a stressful event, you have to be able to manage that stress to be able to make a good decision, based on whatever the scenario is. Like, you have to manage stress.
Well, shouldn't it be a use of force instead of shooting? Like, honestly, shouldn't that qualification that we do, shouldn't it be more towards, hey, come out, firearm, and guy comes out and he has a knife, but he's 40 feet from you. Well, okay, like transitioning to different, knowing how to transition, and that goes with the incident that we're talking about here. Or you're in a fist fight with somebody, and there is a time where you're in a fist fight where it goes lethal, and I won't disagree with that. But most of the time, if you have that option to go to a less lethal or less than lethal, whatever we want to call it, you go to that. But if you've never trained on, I've trained on a taser like a lot of times, and I don't carry a taser, but
I carry it for you. Remember?
Yeah. And we talked about that already, but I don't carry a taser because I don't trust them, and it's not my go-to. High stress. If I'm reaching for something, I'm not proficient in a taser. I'll say that. Maybe I do reach for my gun instead of my taser.
Well, that comes down to, you said, Kyle, I don't think you need to be a great shot, and I absolutely disagree with that. I think you should be an absolutely great shot, and I think the standards needs to be raised, and the way you raise that is through those stressful environments, because you've seen those officers, everyone out here that's listening to this, have shot next to an officer that is nutted up, that is stressed out on a complete stagnant line with other officers around them, complete controlled environment. They are super stressed already. And then in the course of fire, they can barely remember it, and they barely pass. And sometimes they don't pass, and then they are there multiple times to pass. Mm-hmm. That person is way too stressed out. I think the department and the officers around should be like, listen, you can't work the street right now. You need to be comfortable on a static line. And you talk about, the difference of pulling a taser versus a gun at a complete stagnant firing line. When they're like, all right, 2 rounds to the chest, ready, threat. You pull your gun and then you shoot 2 rounds. No. That is fucking lame. Mm-hmm. That is not training at all. It should be, all right, and it does take discipline, and people are going to be kind of nervous, and I think that's the controlled environment, which I don't think we need to talk about here. But with the shooting, where it's like you should be moving constantly, because virtually no shooting is standing still. You should be moving, and then threat. And then you make that determination of how many rounds you're going to fire, or am I going to pull a taser? And I think if that's integrated in training from the start, you may make a decision to pull a taser or a gun. But it comes to the stressful environment of getting in a shooting when you see these specific officers, and you've seen them. And I know you can think of specific names right now. Don't say it, but you can think of it, where they're nutted
Kyle
up.
Schoberg. Oh, sorry.
I was thinking Billy.
That's funny. The most.
Yeah.
But the officers that are nutted up in a controlled environment, nothing dangerous about it, and they are so scared that they're going to fail the fucking qual that they barely pass. That, to me, do you want that person next to you?
Well, I think that firearms training and firearms qualification, which is a form of training, you've talked about involving stress in the training before. I've talked about it. You've talked about it. You can't fully get that type of stress.
No, you can't.
Not real world. No, you can't get real world.
I mean, I think that the stress that is involved in training and qualification is here, and the stress that's involved in an actual incident is probably above the roof line here. So,
But-
it's the firearms training qualifications and mechanics. That's what it comes down to.
But
I think mechanics should be from the academy initially and then built on and moved, because when you work on when you learn to tase somebody or to baton someone, it's minimal on mechanics. It's about the actual process of doing it. They teach you to do it. Shooting is so 6-point draw, 4-point, whatever the fuck you want to call it. It's over and over.
And I agree. But I think the academy standard for shooting should be 10 times higher than the in-service training.
Yes, absolutely.
And the reason I think that is because there is an actual stress there. Like, once we talked about how it's kind of hard to get fired in law enforcement. I could do a minimal qual all day long.
Yeah.
Or a lousy qual, but barely pass, or do my remediation and then pass. Whereas in the academy, you pass or you fail.
Yeah,
and when you fail,
you're done.
You're done. You don't have the standard to be a cop. And now we have these smaller standards that have to happen in the academy, where it should be like, no, you can't throw a single round out of the 10X or whatever.
Yeah.
What I want to say is, if you're in this job where it is a life and death, this job is not like any other job out there. I mean, you are given a firearm and a bulletproof vest every day you go to work. That's what you're wearing. First of all, if that doesn't strike home to you about the kind of job you have, then you should probably reconsider your career. But going a step further, if you are not training yourself to handle stressful situations, I do not feel sorry for you when you're on the stand crying, pleading for your case because you made a poor decision, because you've never prepared yourself for that environment. Like, I can't feel sorry for you. I just don't. It's like the cop that shows up and, briefing starts and you're like, hey, are you logged on? Is your shit ready? Is your gear all ready to go on your passenger seat of your car, or however you stow your patrol car? Like, that all starts before briefing. You don't go to briefing and then after briefing, go get all your stuff together, because in the middle of briefing, or maybe just before your briefing starts, something may happen and you may have to fly out the door, jump in your car and go to a situation and be ready already. Right. But there are cops out there who think, well, I don't start until 6. So why would I show up at like 5:30 and get my shit ready when then I should get paid overtime? No, you shouldn't get paid overtime. Like, you're not in a job, an ordinary job where you're going to get paid for every second that you're at work. Like, there needs to be that understanding amongst cops, period.
Most other non-law enforcement careers are exactly the way that you're describing it. People are doing all these things to better themselves, to get more educated, learn different computer programs. They're doing everything outside law enforcement. I agree with you. I'm supporting what you're saying. Law enforcement should not be that way also. Yeah.
So it's like, if that's your mind frame, you've got it wrong. Like, you signed up for the wrong job if that's your mind frame. And that may offend some people, and maybe not everybody agrees with that. And I'm fine with that. But I don't feel sorry for you when you made a very piss poor decision when it comes down to it. And then I find out that you haven't done anything to prepare yourself leading up to that, knowing the job that you're in.
Well, I think that it comes down to the fact that if you got into law enforcement because you're like, they get paid well, good retirement.
A lot of people do.
And they do. A lot of people do. But then you shouldn't be doing it.
You're right.
You honestly shouldn't.
But a lot of people do, especially nowadays. I
get that.
You talked about construction being I've done construction too. You're right. If it's raining, you're not going to work that day, meaning you're probably not going to get paid.
No, not getting paid. Not probably.
Exactly.
I worked in the rain because I was like,
a lot of people get in this job because they know 365 days a year, you're going to work. Rain, snow, hot as hell. You have a job. It's secure. You got benefits. You're going to work. And there's literally people out there. I hear it all the time. They show up and they say, I'm just putting in my 10 hours and I'm going home. And that's their mentality.
Yes.
If that is your mentality and you're listening to this, please don't fall victim to that shit. Like, you cannot have the mentality of, I'm just going to show up to work. I'm going to put in my 10 hours a day or 12 hours or whatever, however long your shift is. And I'm just going to go home. If that's the mentality that you have a piss poor mentality, and that shit is cancerous. And if you're working with people that are out there saying those things, you are working with a cancer cell, and don't fall victim to that shit. Because I'm telling you right now, when something bad happens, and it may be one time in your career, I don't care if you work in some little small ass podunk agency and you think nothing bad is ever going to happen there, so you're not putting in the extra time, something bad is going to happen there at some point. And if you are not ready for that, what is your excuse?
Well, I had a few days ago, I had a really good conversation with a coworker I used to work with that medically retired. We had a great conversation, and he had a really good outlook on what you're talking about. And I had never heard this ever. And I fell victim of that. He was saying when he first started, there was a lieutenant, I think he was a sergeant at the time, had a conversation with them during training and said, listen, there's two types. You doing all right over there, buddy? Arms up. Arms up. Whew. Don't you tell kids to do that when they're coughing?
Sorry,
arms
dude.
up. Give us a thumbs
Go
up.
ahead. My bad.
Fucking children.
He said, the sergeant at the time told him, like, there's two types of cops. There is a cop that puts 100% effort into his job, does all the outside training, and is going to be the best guy that you can work with, and will move through, work all these specialty units, and that is his life. Then you're going to work with the other cop, the one that makes his home life everything, and he just comes to work. And when he told me that, I was like, fuck, man, that is totally true. And he said, I picked home and my family to be the most important. And he was never the type that was, I think he's a little different, because he was never the one that was like
Complacent?
He was not complacent. He was a smart, good cop, but he worked patrol. He didn't do a ton of extra stuff. He'd work some overtime jobs, but he was content at that. And I think for me on the other side, I was all in, and it absorbed me, and it takes a toll on your home life. But I think if can change the mentality where you can have kind of both, where, hey, I know home life is really important, but when I get to work, I have to put 100% effort in. And I do think that's where the departments really should emphasize on training and support people on training and say, go to this. Because I remember there was a time where I put in for all kinds of training, and they're like, nope, sorry, we're not going to pay for it. And it's like, well, fuck it, I'm going to pay for it myself. And I did a lot of the training on my own with my buddies.
Exactly. And if you have to pay for a training on your own, then fork out the $150, $200 or whatever, like, do it.
But here's the thing. Training doesn't have to be formal. It doesn't have to be.
Good point.
I'm paying somebody. It can be like, hey, Sergeant Kyle, you know about canines. Can I talk to you for a little bit about it? And hopefully that person isn't an asshole. We're up for judgment still here, but but hopefully they're like, yeah, let me talk to you about it. And, or maybe it's, hey, you've been involved in some critical incidents. You're not even in law enforcement anymore. You've been in some critical incidents. Can I talk to you about those? You've done the tactical SWAT officer. You know what, you know more tactics than I do. Hey, what would you do here? And maybe it's not even something that you agree with, but hey, now he's just giving you a certain other thought about
perspective,
it. Of like, hey, I do it because of this. And you're like, that's fucking stupid. Or maybe you're like, fuck, that actually makes sense. And then you try it.
Do you think it has anything to do with the department is a little younger and less experienced? Because when we came on, my FTO had like 8, 10, 12 years of experience, and an officer that has 12 years on as an FTO, all of my FTOs wanted to teach the young guys, and they flooded you with information. And it was like, I think I had 7 FTOs, and it was like, oh my God, like everyone's got all these different ideas. And then nowadays I look at it and like, there's officers that have 2.5 years on and they are an FTO. Like, that officer doesn't know the job, and now they're teaching someone else. So I think people are losing the mindset.
I also, I look at the FTO program, I learned more after FTO than I did during FTO, personally. and I, some people will disagree and say different, but I felt that, I learned that, hey, this is the way that it's supposed to be done. This is, it's black and it's white.
Oh yeah,
There's the wrong way and the right way, and I'm going to teach you the right way. Mm-hmm. And if you're in law enforcement and you think that it's always black and white, you're wrong. It's just not. So when I was done with law enforcement, I was lucky enough to have friends that had been out for a year or two in patrol. So they had a little bit of experience, and they're like, hey, come ride with me for a day, or, show up to their call, or they show up to my call and they're like, no. We're going to go this other route. And you're like, oh, that actually makes sense.
Well, you learn the gray area, I think, when you're off of training.
Yeah.
When you're in training, I think the gray area doesn't exist as much, but
I don't like the gray area. I don't like the gray area because when you
what do you want to call it?
is.
The pink area? What is it?
the ability to articulate what you're doing.
All right, whatever.
Settle down.
We color it.
Well, yeah, but gray area makes it sound like you're doing something
like it couldn't be bad.
Yeah.
Right.
Like
I get what you're saying, that it could be the wrong way of doing something.
Yeah, no,
and
like, he's in the gray area.
You're making it.
I think where that comes from is they take like black and then white, and you mix those colors together. It kind of makes a gray color.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, and that's where that kind of comes from.
Yeah.
But no, I get what you're saying.
Kyle.
No, but seriously,
the artist.
Yeah.
Mix the colors.
He does do pastel painting on the side. So.
Dude, not on the show.
With fingers.
Oils?
It's finger painting.
Yeah. Seriously, it just comes down to you got to understand that this job is just more than just your like I was telling you, there's a difference between being a police officer and having a 9-to-5 job. If you want to have a 9-to-5 job and not have to worry about being victimized and nothing happened to you, go work at a bank, because you could go be a bank teller. Someone can walk in, point a gun at you, and demand money from you. And all your job is to do is just give that person the money, right? You're not expected to react to that.
Right.
Go do that for a living. If that's what you want to do, that's totally fine. But you're in a profession. If you're a police officer, you are in a profession where if something like that were to occur, or you get into a situation where it's high stress like that, you are expected, to make a good, sound decision. The public expects that of you, and so do your peers. Okay. I know I do. I know you guys all expect that of your partners, and you should expect that of yourselves. Okay. So this isn't like a 9-to-5 job where, I should get paid overtime for coming in at 5:45 when I don't start until 6 because I had to get my uniform on. I had to go get my car squared away. I had to get logged on to my MDT. Like, no. Okay, you do need to do that shit, and you're not going to get paid for it. Why? Because you're squared away, your shit's ready to go, and at the drop of a hat in this profession, you may have to go flying out that door and go into a life and death situation. What other career out there can say that that's what they do for a living?
Firefighters.
Coast Guard.
And what do firefighters do every day when they show up to work? They go over the entire engine, right? They make sure every single thing on that engine is working. They make sure every piece of equipment in that engine or truck is there, and they inspect it. I know they do, because
I mean, you should be doing that. Any cop should be doing that.
They should be.
Well, the difference though between the fire department and the sheriff's or police or law enforcement, I guess you could say, the fire department is strong and they all do everything exactly the same way.
Yep. Right.
Every day. Those vehicles are taken care of. They polish stuff. They make sure they start their saws. Like, you look at it face value and you're like, oh, that's stupid. But like, no, they're fucking smart. Everything they do is choreographed. And then you look at law enforcement and it's like, well, dude, this car is garbage. Like, all of this stuff. And I think it comes down, and I think you are in a good position because you are a sergeant, where you could start integrating that into your department, and all of your roll calls, you could be really forcing that. Like, hey, I'm doing a vehicle inspection. Like, I'm doing this stuff. Like, make sure, like, you could be the start of that culture shift and change. Is really teaching that. Man,
I totally agree with you. And to take it a step further of doing just inspections or whatever, like, I do it a lot. And that is, go out, and I know we've talked about it before on these shows, like, go out and put together scenario trainings for your people, for your teams or whatever. If you have downtime in the middle of the night, you're a graveyard cop or whatever, go set up a scenario. Go do something simple like, hey, let's go work on building searches today, or let's work on low lighting searching conditions and flashlight techniques, like, go work on that stuff. if you're not doing those things and you're just going to work every day and you're just putting in your 10 hours, you've got all this downtime in the middle of the night and you're not even trying to better yourself. Like when shit hits the fan, what do you honestly expect of yourself? Like, do you just expect yourself to just rise to the occasion, show up and be some fucking badass? Like, I'm here to tell all of you, that is not what's going to happen. I fucking promise you. Like, I've been on situations where guys have shit the bed and have run the opposite way when shit goes bad. I've been there. Mm-hmm. So, and we've all seen it and we've heard of it.
What do you think the difference is between the people that shit the bed and the people that don't?
Training. They absolutely, the people that don't, I think don't shit the bed are more likely have trained themselves mentally and physically. So what are mental to handle this?
I think it happens long before law enforcement.
I'm not saying it has to occur in law enforcement. Obviously, let's say you develop prior to law enforcement, it should continue while you're in law enforcement, right? Always mentally playing scenarios out in your head. And
here's one thing, like, so when I worked corrections, I was a training officer and I would ask my trainees, I'd be like, hey, have you ever been in a fight before? And it'd be like day one for them or whatever. They're like, here at work? I'm like, no. Have you ever been in a fight before? And they're like, what do you mean? I was like, have you ever,
no.
Have you ever like had a brother, I don't know, or friend or a freaking enemy at that point? I don't care that you've been like, hey, we're going to punch each other. Maybe not even in the face, but you've been in a fight before.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many people said no. And my immediate response was like, man, I really would hate for the first time to be in a fight to be the time that it matters. Life
the
or
most.
death.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they'd be like, what do you mean? I said, look, I mean, you get punched in the face, it hurts. And you're going to go two ways, like, ow, or you're going to be like, fuck you. Right? Mm-hmm. You don't know that until you've been there. And I would hate for it to be, I'd much rather you punch me in the face and be like, fuck you or ow. And I'd be like, oh, okay, that's different. Because I know pretty much that you're not going to kill me.
I'll just,
like,
probably,
I mean, like 50-50.
Kill you.
50-50. But there's a guy on the street, he punched me in the face and I go, ow. And I cower to it.
And then he punches you more and more.
Well, his intent is to kill you.
And I go defensive or whatever. Yeah. I mean, that mindset needs to be long before you get into law enforcement.
That is very true.
Dude, I totally agree with you. And when you get into this job, that's not a time to just quit. Like, you got to keep building on that foundation.
So what are some things that you could do mentally? Because you really,
I think scenarios. I think your mental scenarios that you play out in your rehearse in your head while you're driving around.
No, I'm kidding.
Yeah,
I'm totally joking on that.
Don't do that.
Sober. Please don't do that. Yeah,
because it'll hurt.
No, seriously though, like mental preparation. So mental scenarios in your head, driving around through town. Like, I don't know, drive up next to a 7-Eleven and run through your head. Okay, I pull up next to the 7-Eleven and I look and it's being robbed. What am I going to do right now? And you play that out. To Z, start to finish, play that scenario out in your head. There's just countless of things that you could do.
I do that all the time. Anyway, like I do that off duty sometimes.
Yeah. What are you going to do if you're at a stoplight and someone walks up and a crosswalk and pulls a gun on you or starts shooting at you because you're a cop? So what are you going to do?
What I'm seeing, and I'm only saying this because I'm kind of on this edge of this table, is both of you are what I would define as the cop that I would want to come onto my house. Like the go-getter, the not afraid, the mindset's right. Like you guys are, and you're the cop's cop.
I don't know if it's necessarily the guy that you want to come to every call.
No, for sure not. Because Kyle's not going to have zero
that.
compassion for me.
Exactly.
I have a lot of empathy, actually.
No, empathy and compassion is totally different.
No, I have a lot of compassion. But you'd be surprised. I
see that common denominator in the two of you, and I have the same mindset of constantly thinking that stuff, literally to how I parked my car on the street. But I think we could say it's common that those officers that we know that don't, and the ones that are not prepared, don't have that mindset. So I think it comes before cop is the mindset. It's your mindset.
You brought up compassion, and that's actually a very good point. And also in my class I teach is you have to have empathy for people. Like you have to know when to have empathy for people. And we've already discussed this in a prior episode, but you got to have empathy for people. You do have to have compassion for people. You don't treat people like shit just because you can or think you can. I hope that's not the point we're
just
getting
so you know,
across.
you can't.
Yeah, you need to treat people with respect, okay? And until it's time to not treat somebody with respect anymore, then you need to treat them with respect. What we're talking about and what we're focusing this topic on is that's all out the window. We're talking about these high stress situations.
But you have the mindset.
Well, I'm just saying is like, I think we've all heard it. Treat everyone like your grandma, but have a plan to kill them.
Sure.
Like honestly, that's what
that's
it
a
is.
good point.
You should treat everyone like your grandma, your sister, your mom, someone that you respect, and you don't want to start dropping F-bombs or whatever. But like, if they want to go that route, like, I'm talking to you,
ready to go
like,
that
hey,
route.
how's it going? How's it going, Mark? And you're like, oh, okay. But like right now, even okay, if he does this, I'm going to do this. But I could still be cordial with him and nice and make him think that I'm respecting him. Not think, but be respectful and respecting them. But hey, if you want to go that route, I'm a step ahead of you.
Yeah. So how do you get that cop that does not have that mindset to have that mindset?
I think it's a culture. Honestly, I think it comes with probably the culture of maybe your department or your team that you work on or your leader. A lot of it boils down to leadership. As a leader, a sergeant, lieutenant, whatever, even the chief of police or sheriff or whatever, like, what leadership are you bringing to the table to make your guys or gals have that type of mindset where, hey, we're going to go out and treat people with respect because that's what we do. We're professionals. But like he said, at the same time, know when it's time to act and do what you need to do to handle business, not fold under pressure or accidentally pull your gun and shoot and kill someone when you meant to pull your taser because you can't handle that stress. And a lot of it comes down, you brought up physical, appearance, right? Like it's mental and physical. So when we talk about physical, like my mom texted me the other day about this trial that's going on. And I guess she expected me to have all this compassion and feel bad for this cop that was on the stand. She's crying and she was backpedaling her story of what she had said originally on body cam after she shot this guy, which you can't do. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But I think my mom expected me to have all this compassion for her, which she obviously did. She's pro police and, she thinks that all cops probably do right. Okay. So no fault to hers, but my answer to her was a little different. And, size got brought up and weight and stuff like that. And she's like, well, how can you judge somebody based on their appearance? Well, I hate to break it to you, but it's like, but you can judge somebody on their appearance, and you are a product or your own personal standard is how you look. So take a good look at yourself in the mirror. And if you're way overweight, you can barely bend over to tie your own boot when you go to work. You have a hard time putting a duty belt on. You get out of breath quickly.
Why do you gotta take all these shots at me right now?
Yeah, you're far
Billy's
from
like,
fuck, dude. Checked
You're
like
far
5
from
of those
that, but-
boxes. I think you only had 4 of them, but I checked all 5.
Seriously though, like if that's you, like I'm sorry to like take the wind out of your sails or hurt your feelings, but like that you're a product, like your self standard of yourself is your own appearance. Like that is your standard of yourself, and it starts with how you look. How do you put your uniform on every day? Does it look good? Is it crisp? Does it look nice? I mean, there's a saying out there that says the first line of use of force is the way you look.
yeah.
Your presence and the way you look and the way you dress. There is something to be said about that. And when I told her that, I think she was a little taken off guard, but it's true. We just watched a video recently of a very overweight cop got into a shooting, life and death situation where a guy tried shooting him and he could barely get out of his own way.
Well, he had to adjust his gun belt as he's trying to move.
Exactly.
Because it's falling. That
in this profession, it goes back to what I'm talking about earlier, is to me, it's unacceptable for the profession that we're in. And it's not a bias against anybody. It doesn't mean that that's an attack on someone that's overweight. All it means is that's your standard. The way you look in your appearance, that's your standard, and you should want better of yourself.
And I don't necessarily say it's the weight thing's an appearance thing, because I've known and I've worked with big guys and girls that are a little bit bigger, and some might say, oh, they look like they're out of shape, but they're just big people. And some of them I'd be like, when it comes down to it, I want them there.
Right, but at least they're probably tight, squared away. They're athletic. There's some athletic mobility to them. They probably work out, I would imagine.
Yes, but that's not. You were talking about the general appearance. Like they don't look athletic. I mean, you look at an offensive lineman in the NFL who's 6'8", probably, or 6'4" and 350, and you'll be like, some of them you're like, that dude's fat.
Yeah, they're fast.
But yeah, well,
and they got feet.
But that's not an appearance thing. That's an after the fact thing. So I don't want to sit there and say, hey, because you look like this.
You're right. So it's not, I guess
it's your partners, the way that they look at you and they go, hey, you know, like I've had bigger partners and I've had the opposite, and not just necessarily because, you know, they don't work out and lift weights. It's because they're just short, smaller people.
So then I'll say this: if you are an overweight person, but you've got big, saggy pants on that are clearly way too big even for you, your belt looks out of whack, like your uniform is big and sloppy.
Well, that goes.
That is your self standard.
Anybody that has,
I think that's uniform.
Yeah,
right.
the uniform presence. But there's some of that with the size and the weight is, I think there's a big difference from the department and then the officers themselves. The officers themselves have to hold yourself and others to a higher standard. And I don't think that's easy to do. And I don't think it's happening a lot right now. But the departments also, the department I came from, they actually got rid of their physical fitness requirement. So once you got the job, there's no fitness requirement. So the officer that you're talking about that got in that shooting, the department said, we do not have a standard for fitness for you. So you can be as overweight, sloppy, unathletic as you want.
Neither do we. A lot of departments don't.
Which is crazy.
I agree.
Because you look at the fire department, upper management that is not working the street, their fitness changes because the culture changes. When you were a patrol officer, detectives changes almost immediately. You can see when someone goes to detectives, their weight changes. But patrol and specialty units, most should be fit. And Bill, you bring up a good point of fitness is kind of a different with your weight, but everyone should be working out. And I think they should be doing it on their own time, because I work out on my own time for my job. They don't pay for my workout anymore. But also the department needs to have those standards. And some departments pay officers to have workout time, which I think is great. They should be doing that.
We have that.
Which is great.
And you know what I see sometimes, which is sad, is
they sit in the gym.
They do nothing.
Yeah.
They go walk the parking lot in their normal street clothes or whatever. They're not taking advantage of it, or they're literally sitting in the gym, just sitting there on their phone. Like they're not even taking advantage of something they're getting paid to do.
It is frustrating, but I think that's a managerial's failure at that point. Somebody should be monitoring that, saying, you are not working out. If you are here, you're getting paid to work out. So you must be on your own time walking the parking lot, because that's not part of the fitness program. I think that gets...
Well, I think what you're talking about is the management sometimes being scared to say something because the liability behind it of an employee filing a complaint or whatever have you. And I want to talk about liability after we're done talking about this. Liability is a good topic to discuss. But
the fitness overall... There's a ton of components, and unfortunately, departments don't have standards. And some departments, like where I came from, got rid of that standard, which tells the officer it's okay not to do this. And I think that's the culture thing of the officer should have that mindset. But that comes back to training, wanting to be safe. And those officers that are that way, and that one officer in particular, you should have the mindset when you go to work, this could happen. And if you analyze that video, that it's terrifying, like lucky all around. Every step of the way could be improved upon. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the importance of all training, is to improve.
I don't even think, I think the mentality shouldn't be if, it's when.
Yes.
When is it going to happen to me?
Yes, when.
Well, and I think that, we could sit here. I think there's any circumstance, any video, any major incident that we could probably go through and we could find something better to do.
But that's how you learn. I think all incidents should be reviewed. And I've said it before. I think I've said it 47 times in one of these podcasts, was debrief. everything should be analyzed for educational purposes. There's
Yeah.
no way. I don't think it's appropriate nor acceptable to analyze that person in that video saying that you are a piece of shit and you're a failure, because that is only going to make that person
Worse.
And I don't think whatever circumstances are, you should tell them they're a piece of shit and a failure.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, that's true.
You might think it, and that's fine to think it. I really do think it's okay to be like, that dude sucks. That chick sucks. They're a piece of shit and they failed. But you don't tell that person that. Maybe they need it. I don't know. Now that
would
I think
it
about
change
it,
if you said, listen, guy or lady, you got some things to work on. You're out here at a stagnant shooting range with your peers,
Yeah.
and you are nutted up and you can barely pull your gun and you're barely passing this qual.
we're getting into even past liability, we're getting into a whole different realm of things though, where do we discriminatory and where do we draw the line? What is it? Is it,
Well, that comes back to the standards. That's what's there. Some departments don't have standards for fitness.
but why do they not have standards? Because they're discriminatory.
Does the fire
I think that's what they are.
I think there should be a standard of what you can do to do the job. And if the job requires you to have the physical capability,
Those are minimums though.
yes, the minimum still from day one to the last day you retire, the minimum requirement that I expect as a citizen is for a police officer to be able to climb a fence, a safe fence, not like a broken down piece of shit, but like a legit fence, a 6-foot fence, 5 foot. You should be able to climb that fence, in my opinion, as a police officer. A police officer should be able
agree with you.
to
Oh, I agree.
climb through a window.
I agree, but we're getting into a realm here where I've never been in management. You're lower management, I would say.
Yeah.
Making the decisions and looking at legality and I think that most departments would be like, yeah, fuck, you gotta be able to jump a fucking fence. But why do they not do it? Beyond my knowledge, beyond all of our knowledge, I think.
that's a great point.
But I
That's a
think
good
what
point.
we're getting at is,
But personally, if you can't get over a fence, maybe it's time to find another job. I think that's what we're getting at, right?
exactly
Yeah,
what
yeah.
we're getting at is you shouldn't settle for just the minimum requirements in this job. Like there's no place for that. And when you find yourself in a bad situation, like you better perform because like, number one, the public expects that of you. Like not only should you expect that of yourself, but your family expects that of you, right? Like your kids, your wife, your husband, they don't expect you. Your kids do not expect you to go to work every day and put in the bare ass minimum and just hope to survive. Like your kids expect you to go to work every day, or your spouse expects you to go to work every day to give it 110% so that you can come home to them and help, be a father or a mother, or a husband or a wife. Like if it's in your head that, I'm just going to go to work and fucking put in my 10-hour days and like just put the bare minimum in.
Well, and that goes
Then
with
that's
it.
you fucking look your kids in the eye and you tell them that when you leave the house every day, I want to see someone fucking do that. That might change your perspective a little bit.
It goes down to what we were saying is if you do this job to be at the standard, then you shouldn't be doing.
I don't
the job.
think you should be doing this job.
And that goes from training to appearance,
Everything.
to physical fitness. If you meet the standard, which in some places is
There
no
are
standard.
none.
There are no standards. So that's why we get some people that
Right. So
maybe
Create
aren't-
your own standard. and
So when
start
you're on
taking those
trial
classes.
and you're crying because you're fucking facing to go to prison for manslaughter or murder, and you've done nothing to make yourself prepare yourself for that situation, I don't feel sorry for you if you're just status quo your whole career and you haven't prepared yourself for what may lie ahead of you. I don't feel sorry for you. Period. Nothing will change my mind on that. I just that's where I'm at. In my train of thought, I've experienced, I think, too many things where you have to be ready to handle that stuff at the drop of a hat. That's what you signed up to do. That's the expectations of your partners, your family, and the community and the public. Period.
And unfortunately, you've experienced those situations where those officers have failed you. And I think that's why you have passion. I like the passion behind it, to be honest.
And that's where that
Yeah.
comes from, is because I have experienced that.
Yeah.
And that's a shitty feeling.
Yeah.
When you show up to something and I expect you to be by my side and do the appropriate thing when something happens and you don't, then it's like you kind of lose faith a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And then you want to question, like, what the hell?
Well, and you've had that. We've all, I'm guessing, we haven't specifically talked about it, but been in that situation where you're in a fight or whatever, and you call for backup. There's people that on your own departments
You don't want to show up.
like, God, I hope they're not the first one here, or I hope. Maybe it's not even that. Maybe it's, I hope so-and-so is the first one here.
I've never actually thought that. I've always hoped that someone was there because I had the opposite, where those officers, you knew they were not going to be there because they drove slower. They took a different route. They missed the turn, and they're doing that shit on purpose
No,
because
I've had that feeling.
they don't want to be there.
I've had that feeling.
And I'm sorry if there's someone who on purpose took more time to get to a partner who is asking for serious help, code 3 cover, whatever it is.
Happened.
If that happened, then I will go to that person and I'll be like, you are no longer working with me. And if I have to keep going, I say, you do it or I'm keep going this up, because that is not okay.
Yeah, no. Hell
It's
no.
absolutely not okay.
No.
It's the same, we could go
I
with
would
that.
tell them they're fired.
I wouldn't tell
Do
them
you
they're
think that
fired,
that
but I'd be
happens?
like,
Do you
I'm
think that
sure
that
it does,
happens?
but
Fuck yeah, it
I mean,
happens.
we could talk about the active shooter at a school. Like, oh, I didn't go in there because it wasn't safe. No shit, it wasn't fucking safe. That's what you signed up to do. And if it's you, that gets smoked before that 8-year-old,
yeah.
fuck you, dude, high five,
Before
good
the
job,
teacher.
dude.
And
Yeah.
you know what? And someone that really trains themselves to go in there and handle that type of situation, when that call comes out, they're gonna be ready for it. They're gonna be ready.
They're gonna be ready, and maybe it is like, I'm not saying that, hey, you're rolling in that school in that parking lot, and then as you go through that parking lot, 30 feet behind you or 100 feet behind you is another car pulling up. Go meet up with them and then quickly be like, hey, let's go. I'm not saying that you can't do that. I'm just saying that you can't just sit there and be like, well, this
is too scary.
not fucking safe.
Yeah.
It's not. You're right. Good fucking call.
This job is not safe
Yeah.
at all. Like nothing about this job is safe.
Grab your shit. If grab your helmet, grab your plate carrier, grab your rifle, grab your less lethal. I hope not, but I mean,
Yeah.
maybe that is. If you're the fifth one there, maybe it is grab the less lethal. But you're the first one, and you're like, I'm going to grab my beanbag gun. Please
Fucking
don't.
anything, just go.
I don't know. Just go.
Yeah.
All right, so let's wrap up the last 15, 20 minutes of conversation. Obviously, this has been kind of not a heated conversation, but it's been a very, I think, passionate type of conversation amongst all three of us, and hopefully, anybody that's listening, maybe something, strikes a nerve with you, or you're thinking back to either yourself or partners that you've worked with, something relevant to what we're discussing, but. The whole point behind all this is, we want you to think, or we want you to know that this is not just a 9-to-5 job. Okay. And that's very important to understand. Your partners need to understand that. And if it takes you to remind people of that, or, maybe you need to be the leader of your team and step up and put on these trainings, or, if you see a good training come across your desk, either send your folks to that training, or if you want to go to the training, sign yourself up for it. And if your department doesn't want to pay for it, then you might have to pony up the $120 some odd to go to the class, or $150, $200 to go to the class. If you can't afford that to better yourself in this profession, then you might want to consider other financial options. But honestly, this is all about wanting to make you guys better, utilizing our own experiences. I think that's what this whole conversation boils down to, and understanding the realism of this job and how it can really impact your life. We're seeing it constantly happening across the nation where cops are being arrested, fired.
I don't think it's how it does impact your life. Like,
How
you're
it does.
a different person no matter what, because you've done this job. whether you want to believe it or not.
No, I totally agree with you. And I think unfortunately some people in this job fail to realize that until it's too late. And so maybe something we said made you realize that you want to be ahead of the game, not behind the game, so to speak. So I guess in closing, all we can do is give you a spark or motivate you to want to be better. Nobody can make that conscious decision to make you be better. That all lies within yourself. Okay. So you can watch all these motivational videos, on wanting to be better, and you can listen to podcasts and you can listen to what we're saying. All it is people motivating you to give you a spark to want to be better. But all of that lies within yourself, and you have to want to make yourself better. So the work fully lies within you. All we can do is give you that spark to want to be better. But it falls on you at the end of the day.
Well said. I can't even add to that. Billy?
I mean, like, I like to argue, but like, if you don't have that spark, then like, if you don't want to be better, like, please
You did
be
find
better
an
every single day. Like, you should want to be better, even if you're the best, every single day. So if you need that spark, hey, we're more than happy to help, but you should have that within you somewhere already.
Everybody's indispensable, and nobody is better. Nobody is the best. If you think you are the best and we removed you from the equation.
Well, I'm the best podcaster out of the three of you.
Oh, really? Are you?
No.
I have
Far
been the
from it.
best at a few times at work. I've been the best.
So,
But those moments have passed.
yeah. So if you think
far
you're
from the
if you
best,
think you're the indispensable person, and if we removed you from the equation, I hate to break it to you, the clock keeps ticking, calls keep coming out, and the job continues. And in 6 months, a year from now, people are going to forget who you are. It's the nature of the game. And, that doesn't sit well with people, but it is what it is. And while you're in the game, you need to you need to be on your A game all the time. And it is what it is. We signed up for it. It's what we all sign on the dotted line. It's what, like I've said before, the public expects that of us. We should expect that of us in our own community, and your family expects that of you. So anything less than that, to me, is meeting the bare minimum standard. And like you said earlier, you probably should look for a new career, because this is a job where you shouldn't just want to meet the basic standard.
No, if you are sitting there and you're like, I meet the basic standards, and that's good enough for me, then I don't want you as my partner.
Yeah.
And probably your partners don't want you as your partner. And if you're okay with that, maybe, I don't know, stick with your paycheck, but hopefully your partner step up and be like, I don't want that. The bare minimum is not good enough.
No.
And if you raise the bar to where you guys are at, or where the best are at, I still think you should want to be better.
Absolutely. I mean, I strive to be better all the time. I'm constantly educating myself in this field. And
I think the harsh reality, though, is there are those people that are going to do less than the bare minimum. They're barely going to get by. They're going to go to training days and they're going to sit on the side, come up with the reason not to do it. They're going to make an excuse. They don't want to participate. When they do, they half-ass it.
And that's fine. If someone wants to be that way, that's fine. But if you're listening to this, don't fucking be that person.
Yes.
I've been that person, though.
But those people, you know who they are, and I think they know who they are, and their job every day is difficult because no one wants to be around them. Mm-hmm. So I think that's where the spark comes in. I think you should try and do better.
Yeah, I think that the department training, for the most part, is so bare minimum that if that is where you're getting your training and your stress from, then
You got a
I
long
can't
way
even
to go.
say that the department I came from provided training, because it was an annual training a week and you sat in a classroom and it was horseshit. It was garbage. Not one single person wanted to be there. If those classes were spread out throughout the year, I think people might want to be there, because
But that goes against your statement of, wanting to be there, and, the guy who's on the sideline who says it's, stupid or whatever, which you just said, which like I said, I've been that guy before because that training is bare minimum, and you can teach me the bare minimum 1,000 times, and I've been through. I think we can all agree that from year to year to year to year, it's the same fucking thing over and over again, and you're like,
yeah, but the real training,
I get it, I've done it, I've done it, and yeah, we're checking that box of the standards, but like. So you could don't judge that person who's on the sideline who's going like, yeah, this is stupid. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're not the partner that you want. Maybe they're just like, look,
but that's where going out and getting your own training comes in to play. That's what I'm saying. Like that week-long training that we used to get, that's bullshit. Like no one wants to be there. I don't even want to be there. It's a waste of time. The training that I got value from was seeked out by myself, sitting in a car, talking with my partners, working with my teammates, finding houses to search on our own, bullshitting back and forth, doing research ourselves. It was all driven by me or other people that I worked with.
And if you seek out training and then you have that attitude, then that's what we're talking about, I think.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about.
We're talking about the person who goes to the training that they signed up for, that they didn't have to go to, and then they're like, well, I'm too cool for school, because that's literally what it is. Like, oh, and I'm trying to be that too cool for school around my friends, my partners, whatever it is. No, like, if you're going to go to a training that has value, that you want to do, soak it all up. Take notes. There probably isn't a test. Test yourself, though.
Well,
after the fact.
I always thought it was interesting. Some of these classes that I paid to go to, they're like, oh, it's 2-hour lunch long enough? And I'm thinking like, okay, I mean, at the time I enjoyed it, but really like now I look back like, fuck man, you have something to offer somebody. A 30-minute lunch is way more than you should eat in there. Like they should just be telling you everything they possibly can think of.
Yeah. And if you're teaching a class, like, man, make it so well worth someone else's time. Like,
if you got to give a 2-hour lunch, your class
sucks.
Yeah, and the person teaching it's probably not doing a great job.
Yeah.
So do you give 2-hour lunches at your class?
Hell no. You get like maybe an hour.
Yeah. An hour, I'd say.
And we skip breaks. I'm like, we're not taking a break. We're skipping through it. You know what? But guys don't complain. But because I bring that real life credibility to the table, people want to listen. And, so anyways, good point. I think
you should always constantly seek out different training, even if it's any training is better than nothing. You should always be doing training.
Absolutely.
I think Billy doesn't agree.
No, I don't. I don't agree that any training is better than nothing.
I think it is, because if you have some crazy toolbox and you come across, I took a class on drug endangered children. Used it one time, and I assisted a patrol officer, and I saw it was like a pipe or something that was like a certain height where this kid in the house could reach it. It was a little kid, and I was like, oh my God, like that's a deck case. That's a whole different charge, all of that. So we had CSI come out and take measurements of the kid, the height of the kid's reach, where that pipe or whatever it was at, like created different charges. And that was a drug endangered children class I took. That was 8 hours. That was like, it was interesting, but I never thought I'd use it, but I used it.
Okay. So let me give you my example.
Oh shit. Okay. Go.
I mean, going on Instagram right now, you can see the tactical guy who's teaching people probably how to, when you have a gun pointing to your face, how to grab that gun and disarm that person.
I know what you're talking about.
I think we've out there.
Yeah,
maybe.
but what's that guy's credibility is what it comes down to.
But hey, no training is bad training. That's bad training.
No, if someone points, if you have never seen how to take away a gun from someone's hand, and there's a gun 8 inches from your face, and you have time to try fucking something, I say that training is better than nothing. Because if you pointed a gun in my face,
that's true,
and I never knew how to do it,
and this guy's a clown. That's true.
I would just stand there and be like, "Oh my God, there's a gun in my face." But if my hands were free and there's a gun 8 inches from my face, I'm fucking taking it. I'm fucking ripping that dude. He's throwing it on the ground like we did in the academy, and I'm pointing that thing at you, and you're getting shot.
I mean, like we did that in the academy, but there's some circumstances where you're like, I'm not. You have to equate those, and you're like, no, I'm not doing it, because that's horrible training. If you're going to that training and you're sitting there, and if you go to it as a joke and you're like, okay, like I see the takedown's a good takedown, whatever it is the jujitsu or whatever this guy's teaching
I
is like.
haven't seen it, but if you put a gun in my face, I will take the gun from you if my hands are free.
I will shoot you first.
Fucking poke you in your eyeballs.
Hey, let's do that high
you know
stress
what?
training right now. Give me a gun.
I would have at least fucking tried.
Hey, here's the
You're
thing.
right. There's try and there's not try, but
I will
we're
not
going
be a
down. We're
victim.
going down a rabbit hole.
Billy,
here.
I will not be a victim.
Listen, here's what I say.
I like that.
Yeah, to both your guys' point, you should vet out trainers and certain trainings that you do go to that you're wanting to get a lot of value out of. Like there are a lot of BS trainers out there who put on some bogus ass shit. You should really vet out probably who they are, like what is their experiences and why can they teach the class that they're teaching. I actually encourage that. But I mean, you both make good points. I mean, some level of training is probably better than no training, but
95% of that dude's moves were probably stupid, but the last kick in the nuts, you're like, fuck, that was pretty good. I'll take that away. You know, like,
No, I like it because it's like the guy's like sitting there. He's like, I'm gonna shoot you, and it's like these movements like this, and
it's like our
what?
it's like our DTAC training.
And you're like, then they show on Instagram they show like I want to say it's like a 6-year-old girl with a Nerf gun to her dad, and he goes and tries it, and she's like, shoots dad in the face, or slaps him in the face when he goes to grab it, like pulls it back and slaps him with the other hand. I forget which one it is, but it's like okay.
So
yeah, that's like our DTAC training, our annual DTAC training, which is like,
see, the
Such a
department
joke.
put it on. It's probably not great.
yeah.
Gotta
But
be calm.
isn't it sad to think though that like California sets the bar on like standardized training for cops, which is pretty weak. Imagine all these other states that like don't even touch California. Like that's crazy.
That's the importance of
That's crazy.
talking and communicating and thinking of scenarios and doing walkthroughs. And
I think I think the training is more important from partner to partner, friend to friend, that kind of stuff. On patrol, being like, hey, how would you handle this?
No, yeah, those are good. Those are good training
and then be
tips.
like, and then they say how they handle it, and you say, well, that's stupid. I do it like this, and then you guys have that real life adult conversation, and it's got to be an adult conversation because if I say, Kyle, that is fucking dumb. Why were you thinking that? You got to be like, well, this, and I'd be like, wouldn't it be easier if you did this? You're like, fuck. For once,
like
he's
would.
right.
I kind of feel like you would do that.
I would call you if I am like, even if I probably agreed with it, I just wanted you to explain it a little bit more. And I'd be like, I'm like, that's stupid. And you're like, it's not stupid because this, but oh shit, be humble. Be like, oh, okay. Mm-hmm. It actually does make sense.
well, Kyle and I had a conversation off to the side, actually on the phone, when you were talking about something, and I was like, nope, this is my opinion. I believe that. And then he like passionately hammered down, remember, a bunch of these different topics. And I was like, you know what? Based on what you're saying, I'm going to change my opinion. And I completely agree with what you're saying. And from there out, I've had a different opinion. And it's not easy to be the one that's like, I was strong on my stance. He gave his, and then I told him like, "Hey, dude,
It was a pretty normal conversation. Then I feel like I crushed you in the dirt, and then you're like, okay, my opinion's changed.
Yeah, but that's how you change your opinion. That's how you grow and you get better. And it's hard, to be honest, it's hard for me to be like,
Yeah,
to submit to that. But it's like, hey, you know what? I think
Well, don't have that ego is what it is.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And the fact is we could all talk about the situation. We could all have our way that we did it, and not one of us could be right. We could all be wrong and we can all be right. And you'd be like, oh, I like the way that you handled that part, but like the rest that you did was fucking dumb.
Yeah.
And then you can be like, oh yeah, this part. And then all of a sudden we're sitting there like, what if we did it like this? And you're like, oh man, now 3 minds are better than one, right? Mm-hmm. Whether, you have your experiences, I have my experience. 3, a lot of the same, a lot different though.
Yeah. Kind of like the way we're dressed.
Yeah.
A lot of the same.
Billy copied me, by the way.
A little different.
Fuck.
I do want to say that I did not get that memo.
You didn't get the plaid memo?
A little fucking disappointed.
Dude, yeah, okay. We'll make sure we get that text out better.
Hats
Yeah.
and plaid today.
Yeah,
I got plenty well, I have to wear a hat. I'm bald.
that's true. Anyways, all right. Let's wrap it up. I think that was a great conversation.
No, let's not wrap it up.
Yeah, I agree. Billy.
Billy always ruins the ending.
Yeah, I do on purpose.
He doesn't want it to end.
All right.
All right. Well, let's wrap it up, folks.
He's done. Now
All
we're
right.
done.
All right. Yeah. Let's wrap it up. I mean, honestly, I think that was a great conversation, and maybe some of you listening are having a hard look in the mirror, and that's good. That's totally fine. Maybe, a lot of you agree with what we have to say, and maybe some of you don't agree with what we have to say. And you know what, that's totally fine too, but that's just our perspective. But at the end of the day, we should all just want to make each other better. And so if you guys have something to offer for us, please give it out to us. We appreciate all the comments, all the new subscribers. Thank you guys. We really appreciate it. I can't thank you guys enough. That's what keeps us going. Keeps us motivated to keep going. If you guys want to check out my website, kyleshoberg.com, it'll be in the description notes, but, I do put on a class, and it involves a lot of what we're discussing today, and how to get your mind right for a critical incident. The title of the class is Surviving a Deadly Encounter. So check it out if you're interested in hosting a class. Mark, you just put together a class, officer rescue class and some TAC medicine. You have a lot to offer for that.
That'll be coming out soon on your website, right?
Yep. And so that's awesome. We got good things coming. Go check it out. It's very affordable. Like we mentioned earlier, if you guys want to, hire, us or whatever to host a class, like it's out there. Like seek it out, vet these people out, vet these trainers out. But they are very affordable, and
Could save your life.
you should want to do it. Yeah. To save your life, and just, you're better yourself and better your partners. So, check it out, but, follow Billy here on Instagram, Billy Shots Fired Podcast. Mark is still in the wind
still
with Instagram.
Trying to learn the Google.
You want mine?
Yours? I'll manage
You could
it.
be Billy Shots Fired Podcast.
Yeah.
Just put more hair on top of my head. And
Yeah.
we'll do it more for the faces.
I mean,
I'll get one. I'll get one.
all right.
If that's something that you get or you make one.
You make one.
I need somebody to make one for me.
Well,
You can hire my person.
yeah, my girlfriend does his. So
All right.
shout out to Steph.
Good work.
Yeah.
She's going to be busy with mine too.
Probably busier with yours.
All right. Thanks for tuning in, guys. We'll catch you on the next one. And,
All right. Safety second.
safety first, then ask questions later.
Bye.
Those that can do, those that can't teach.
Hey, 49, shot fired.
Copy, additional shot fired.
Shot fired, shot fired. He's shooting at us.
Suspect shooting at officer.